everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm Deziel and today I'm coming back to finish the skirt 114. We'll do the lining piece. We're coming back today to finish the style 114. It's my line skirt, pencil line skirt. And as you could see here, we'll do the front, the open pattern, and we'll do the two pattern piece for the back. To do your lining piece, I'm going to start with the front. You take your front self pattern, fold the hem, and take a piece of paper, a large piece of paper that you're going to fold in the middle because we're doing the complete front. So I fold it in the middle and I'm going to take my self front pattern piece, put it right on the fold of my paper. Then with the tracing wheel, you're going to trace the side seam line on the side seam here, and you're going to trace the seam line of the waist also and indicate both sides of the dart. You also indicate the opening, the zipper opening level and the hip notch. Then you could indicate your grain line. Before to remove your self pattern piece, I would like you to trace the bottom line, original bottom line, and the seam allowance line at the waist. Now the information, this piece is my front. It's going to be cut one time, but not a pair or not on the fold because I have the full pattern. So one time in lining fabric, and if you notice I'm using blue marker because it's a different fabric. Now about the length or the hem of the lining. First you must know that there's many good answers. If you remember, I did trace the final length of the skirt for my lining, but you must know that the length could be either shorter up to, I would say, 1.5 centimeter or 5/8 of an inch, or it could be a little longer than that line, like 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch. That would be the final length of my lining pattern, and these measurements are all good. What you need is just a little calculation to find out where you're going to place the notch for folding your hem on the lining. And here's the calculation. Let's say your lining pattern finish exactly at the final length of your pattern and you have a 4 centimeter hem just like I do. You take everything that is below the final length, so 4, plus here it's 0, that means 4, and you divide it by 2, it gives you 2 centimeter. That's the placement of the notch for the lining. So from the final length 2 centimeter up, that would be the notch for the lining. Give you another example. Let's say the length of your skirt is going down 1 centimeter for the lining. You would do 4 plus 1 is 5 divided by 2, and that would give you 2.5. You would place your notch from the bottom of the lining 2.5 up. I give you a last example. Let's say you decide to make your lining shorter. You still do 4 for the self, but this time you do -1 for the lining. It gives you 3 cm. 3 cm divided by 2. That means from the final length of the lining, you go up 1.5, and that's your hem notch. For this example today, I'm going to cut my lining pattern exactly at the final length. So like I said before, my notch will be at 2 centimeter. Like you could see, I did trace my folding line for the lining 2 centimeter higher. Now you're going to fold onto that line. Then you could add your seam allowance on the side seam and cut your pattern. For this side seam, I put my usual seam allowance value. Then you unfold your paper and cut to the final line for the skirt. Now we're going to do all notches, one at the bottom for the hem, the hip notch, the zipper notch, and the 2 notch for the pleat because it's not a dart anymore, and the single notch at the center front. Now I did open my pattern because this front piece is now going to be right side up in the lining. And I wanted to show you that from the outside, the self, if your zipper is on the right side, on the lining, so the inside, it's the opposite. So I want the right side of the fabric showing from the inside. This is going to be the right side. So that side is where I'm going to have the zipper. Right away, I'm going to indicate that this is the right side up. Then I'm going to remove the seam allowance to move the seam like I showed you in my previous video. So we're going to remove the seam allowance until where? Until 2 centimeters or 3/4 of an inch before the zipper notch. And from there we go diagonal until the notch. That's it, your front piece is finished. Now for the back, you also need 2 more layers of paper, but this time you don't need to put them on fold of the paper. And we're going to retrace all the contour of the piece you're tracing with your tracing wheel, the inside line, the seam line. And for this one also, you're going to fold the bottom, the hem of the skirt. Now when you trace, don't indicate the punch holes because we don't need them, but you do need all the other notch, like elongating the line of the dart. You need the notch for the zipper and the one for the hip. Then you're going to trace the bottom line and all the seam allowance that are good. That means everything except the side seam that is a 2 centimeters, so it's too wide, so don't trace the side seam. Now you're going to add your normal seam allowance on the side seam. Now to elongate the center back, because it's attached to the walking pleat, we're going to measure parallel 5 millimeters or 1/4 inch for the width of the pleat. Now I'm going to finish this line connecting to the original length. I'm going to curve in 2 directions, first towards the top like that, then I will flip my ruler and connect with the original line. Now we did add 5 millimeters, but it's at the bottom of the skirt. It's like in the length of the pleat. But where we really wanted that 5 millimeter excess, it's in the top part of the skirt. So to do that, you're going to take your self pattern again, put it back over, but this time move it down to the 5 millimeter or 1/4 inch down, and you're going to retrace the top part. This way the 5 millimeter will be on the top. Now you could put your grain line and place your informations. This piece is the back. It's style 114. It's going to be cut 1 time in lining. Now we could put the notches, so you have the 2 notches for the dart or the pleat, and you have the zipper notch, you have the hip notch, and you have at the bottom the center back. Now, just like we did for the self pattern, I suggest you do double notch on your center back, but use a different level so there's no confusion. And for the hem notch, you should refer to your front and do exactly the same. So we will put them at 2 centimeters from the bottom line on both sides. Now we can report the grain line on the other side and remove the pin to separate the piece. We're now going to report or redo the grain line on the second piece and write down the informations. Now, just like we have on the front, we have the right side up. Both back pieces are also going to have the right side up. For now, put your left side and your right side one next to the other at the center back. Then place your front right next to it, the side seam where you have the removed part. Then flip your front and place it face to face with your back, and you could trace the part that we want to remove. Already we're going to write the information right side up on both of the pieces. I just remove the seam allowance on the top part for the zipper opening. The next difference is going to be at the bottom of the skirt in the pleat area. Now again, on the real sample, on the real garment, just for you to see what's happening with the difference that we have on the lining. You could see here that we have the extension on one side, and that's going to affect the direction that you're going to sand the pleat. If we want to do it exactly like my sample, the left side has the extension just like the self, but the other side, it's not the straight line. It goes in by the extension amount or value. Now, to make that difference on the pattern, we're going to do it just like the sample. So on this right side, you're going to fold the pattern exactly at the center back, not the seam allowance, but the seam lines, the original center back. And you're going to retrace your seam allowance on the top because we did drop the slit, if you remember. So retrace that seam line. You already have the seam line this direction here because we did trace it with the tracing wheel. And now you're going to report it to have it on the other layer or the bottom part of your paper. Just unfold. Here I'm going to have to move a bit my information for the fabric. We did trace the seam line over there. Now you're just going to trace your seam allowance for both of these lines. Now, just before cutting, make sure everything is okay. You overlap your center back and center back. So seam line over seam line. At the bottom you have notch. So just overlap, overlap. And what you have to check is just to see if seam line is over your new seam line on the right piece. Seam allowance goes this way. If this is all right, you could cut on that new seam allowance line. This little point, you could just cut it because it's due to the fact that we cut in the same time both pieces. So just cut it. Now, since we cut off one piece of that pattern, we have to redo the notch for the 2 centimeter right there for the folding of the hem. Now I suggest that you add 2 last notch, and these you'll appreciate when it's time for sewing. 2 notches, one on the right piece at this corner and another one in the other corner right there for the other piece. Don't forget that these notches should not be longer than half your seam allowance. Then to do your notch in corner like that, you could just fold part of your pattern, and this way you could go and do the notch right there. That's it. All the 3 pattern pieces are finished for the lining. That's it for today. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching and see you soon.